Democrats going with this. If Mondami is the face of the Democrats on the East Coast and Katie Porter is the face on the West Coast, I don't know if that's great politically for that party. Democratic socialism is like a dating profile. Things look great until you meet up in the real world. For example, Bernie Sanders, his big thing was always bringing single-payer health care to our country of 340 million. But when liberal, tie-dyed Vermont tried to do it for a population of 626,000, it collapsed like that poor f*** in the Oval Office last week.
It appears that many Democrats are edging closer to socialism, and Bill Maher believes that direction could seriously damage the party. The outspoken comedian delivered a stark warning. Embrace socialism, push away key voters, and risk defeat in 2028. His remarks were sharp, direct, and impossible to overlook. If you're looking for candid political analysis, subscribe and explore this in-depth breakdown.
Here, very clear. One wing is saying don't ever use the word socialist again, and one is saying,
I am a democratic socialist.
Clear, huh? So how do we decide who's right? Well, it turns out we don't really have to flip a coin. We have the evidence. In 2024, 13 Democrats won. In districts, Trump also won. All moderates. This isn't rocket science. All the left-leaning think tanks have done autopsies on 2024, and they all came up with the same message: move to the center. Even the New York Times, which did so much to promote woke politics, now says the partisans are wrong. Moving to the center is the way to win. And Democrats should recognize the party moved too far left on social issues after Obama left office.
Bill Maher is known for speaking plainly. He cautions that if Democrats continue leaning towards socialism, they could unintentionally hand Republicans a significant advantage. In his assessment, adopting labels and policies that many Americans view as divisive would energize conservative voters, solidify the GOP base, and strengthen their hold on the presidency. Instead of widening their coalition, Maher argues the party might actually narrow it, giving Republicans a potent campaign argument. His advice is straightforward but calculated: return to the center. He believes the Democratic National Committee should focus on practical, everyday issues that appeal to moderates and independents rather than ideological litmus tests. For him, winning elections isn't about pleasing the loudest online voices. It's about building broad support. If Democrats aim to compete effectively in 2028, Maher suggests moderation, not militancy, is the wiser course.
The kids think that stuff that happened before their appearance on the planet didn't really happen, but it did. We've run this experiment many times, and the results are always obvious. Here's capitalist South Korea at night from space. Here's socialist North Korea. Yeah. In 1990, Venezuela was wealthier than Poland. But then Poland, finally free of Soviet-style economics, went all in on capitalism. And now their economy is as big as Japan. And people there have high wages, low inflation, cars, vacations, homes. Meanwhile, Venezuela traded capitalism for Hugo Chavez's socialism for the 21st century, which turned out to be like socialism in the last century, or any century, a fucking mess.
Bill Maher contends that socialism remains politically unviable in the United States because many Americans are instinctively wary of it. From his perspective, voters don't require a history lecture. They've observed how large-scale socialist experiments have played out in various nations. Issues such as economic slowdown, shortages, and expanded government authority often come to mind. Maher argues that many citizens connect socialism with uncertainty rather than growth. Whether those comparisons are entirely accurate or not, he maintains that perception carries enormous weight. In politics, perception frequently determines outcomes. He also suggests voters are cautious about policies that seem to centralize excessive power in government hands. After decades shaped by free market principles and individual opportunity, many Americans remain skeptical of sweeping ideological changes. Because of that mindset, Maher believes openly adopting socialism could drive swing voters away. In a closely contested national race, Even a small shift among moderates could cost Democrats the White House.
One of Latin America's richest countries into one of its poorest. Low wages, high inflation, shortages, outages, 8 million people fleeing. If you think New York can somehow reinvent this wheel, you're in for a rude awakening. Zoran can't make your wishes come true. You're thinking of Zoltar.
Bill Maher references what he considers a practical example emerging in New York, where some Democrats have supported candidates who openly identify as democratic socialists, including Zoran Mamdani. For Maher, this is more than a local development. It represents a glimpse of what might unfold nationwide if the party continues in that direction. He views Mamdani's rise as part of a wider ideological evolution that may energize activists but unsettle moderate voters who ultimately decide elections. Maher argues that history provides a warning. In his opinion, candidates who lean heavily into ideological branding often struggle to sustain broad public trust over time. While Mamdani's long-term influence in New York remains to be seen, Maher predicts frustration rather than sweeping change. He believes performance in office, not campaign slogans, determines political longevity. If outcomes fall short of expectations, voters will respond decisively at the polls.
Democratic socialism is like a dating profile. Things look great until you meet up in the real world. For example, Bernie Sanders, his big thing was always bringing single-payer health care to our country of 340 million. But when liberal, tie-dyed Vermont tried to do it for a population of 626,000, it collapsed like that poor f*** in the Oval Office last week. Bernie, AOC, Mamdani are not Democrats. They'll be the first to tell you that. They're democratic socialists, and that's a very different thing, and I don't think people know that yet.
According to Maher, this is where what he calls the illusion begins. Some voters assume that democratic socialist differs fundamentally from socialist, believing the additional word reshapes the ideology. Critics like Maher argue the distinction is mostly stylistic. In their view, adding democratic does not significantly change the core concepts: greater government oversight, aggressive redistribution, and an expanded state presence in the economy. Advocates of democratic socialism counter that the label emphasizes pursuing reforms through democratic systems rather than authoritarian means. However, Maher suggests that once enacted, the policies can resemble more traditional socialist models in practice. He maintains that branding is influential in politics, and a modified label may soften public reaction initially. Still, he warns that voters ultimately evaluate outcomes, not terminology. If the policies reflect what many Americans already distrust, he argues, rebranding will not protect Democrats from electoral repercussions.
People realize we already have a lot of socialism. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment insurance, food stamps, veterans benefits, Pell Grants, COVID-era payments, farm subsidies, disability payments, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, corporate bailouts, and the jobs program that is building weapons the Pentagon doesn't even want. All that is socialism, much of it appropriate to soften the edges of capitalism, but the DSA are radicals about this concept, and radical economic policy is always ineluctably married to radical social policy. Their platform, for example, calls for completely open borders. They're for what Biden was doing, but more. You think you're going to win an election on that?
Bill Maher also identifies immigration as a significant political weakness. He notes that many voters cited what they viewed as poor border management under Joe Biden as a reason for losing confidence in Democratic leadership. For these voters, border security was not an abstract debate, but a measure of competence and accountability. When people believe systems are not functioning effectively, Maher argues they seek alternatives, even if they disagree with those alternatives on other matters. What troubles him most is his perception that some democratic socialists continue advocating policies voters previously rejected. In his view, This suggests the party has not fully absorbed the political lessons of recent elections. He cautions that repeating the same strategies while expecting different results